Invite the young people to gather around. Well, this morning we find ourselves continuing the Easter story. Let's do a quick review. What happened to Jesus on Good Friday? Yes.
He was crucified.
Perfect. He was crucified. And they put him in the tomb. And then 3 days later, what happened to Jesus? Easter.
He resurrected.
Excellent. Jesus resurrected. And now we're in the middle of some stories about how Jesus appeared to the disciples after his resurrection. Last week we heard that Jesus magically walked through a door, a locked door, to appear to his disciples. And that sounds really almost kind of ghost-like, doesn't it, to be able to do that? It does, exactly. Today, though, we have Jesus doing something very un-ghost-like. What is something that ghosts don't usually do? Yes.
They don't usually punch you because most ghosts don't have any hands.
Ghosts don't usually punch. That's right. That's very good. That's excellent. So Jesus is going to do something that reminds his disciples of other things he did before with them that are also un-ghost-like. Is ghosts don't usually have any hunger, and they don't usually take food or eat. And Jesus certainly ate a lot, didn't he? Do you remember when Jesus fed the 5,000? Do that story?
Oh, yeah.
Yep, all those people. He gave them what? Bread and fish, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then, in the Last Supper, Jesus took some bread and broke the bread and gave it to his disciples and said, "Remember me." Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
So today, in the gospel, the disciples don't recognize Jesus until Jesus takes a loaf of bread and breaks it. And suddenly they remember, this is the person who actually eats with the disciples. So that is how they remember Jesus. Jesus, in his resurrection, is very real. Is a person who needs to have nourishment and needs to take something to sustain his body, because he's a real body. It's not just a ghost or a vision. So today, we gather around and we remember and do what Jesus told us to do with bread and wine up on the altar, don't we? Yes. So what I'd like to do is to give you all a little bit of a close-up look at the things that we probably don't let you see too much of that help us make Eucharist or make Thanksgiving. Eucharist means giving thanks, to give thanks to God for the presence of Jesus, the real presence, the physical presence of Jesus in the bread. So who would like to come up and help me get the stack off the altar? All right? You want to come up? All right, come up. I don't think Sarah's going to need the assistance. We have a little assistance ladder in case it was needed, but Sarah's kind of tall. I think she can manage to grab this off. So grab that underneath there with one hand and put your hand on the top of this and hold that with the other. And let's bring it over here and take it apart and see what we've got inside this. You know, the altar guild calls this the stack. Sounds like a smokestack, doesn't it? But it's the stack of things that help us make the Eucharist. And on the first part of the stack, this is called the burse. And what does burse sound like?
Purse.
Purse, exactly. And purses hold things, right? So burses hold things too. Burses hold extra purificators in case there's a little mess or a spill, because sometimes spills happen in life. So, would you like to hold on to the verse? Excellent. up, right? So this veil is covering up what's underneath it. And we're going to discover what's underneath it in a minute. How would you like to hold on to the veil? You want to hold on to the veil for me? All right, good job. All right. Then we have, we have something called a pall, which is not spelled like my name. It's spelled P-A-L-L. All right? And it is a special board that helps keep things nice and tidy and in order. Who would like to hold on to the tidy and orderness? Are you a tidy and in order person? No. So you and maybe it will help you be more tidy and in order. Then we have a piece of bread. Now, it looks a lot like cardboard, doesn't it? But it really is wheat and water.
I do not want to put that because I'm allergic to wheat.
You're allergic to wheat, so we won't have you hold that. That's all right. It's all right. But you're not allergic to water. No, that's good. All right. Who would like to hold on to the piece of bread? All right. You hold on to the piece of bread. There you go. And the piece of bread is sitting on something called a paten. And a paten is a silver plate. And, oh my goodness, this silver plate even has an inscription on it. It says, given to the glory of God and thanksgiving for the ministry of patens. Isn't that wonderful? Think about paten every time we see that. Who'd like to hold on to the paten? All right. Excellent. You hold on to that. Good. All right. Then we have another purificator. Hopefully we only need one purificator. We don't need the extra ones and we won't have a messy day. But just in case, we always have 3 purificators. Very Trinitarian, isn't it? 3 purificators. Who would like to hold on to the purificator? Jim Alexander, you want to hold on to the purificator? Okay, there you go. And last of all, we have the chalice. And the chalice holds the wine and the water. And you said you weren't allergic to water, right? So why don't you hold on to the chalice for us? That's a very special chalice. There you go. All right. Good. Excellent. So that is how we have these various parts of remembering Jesus, of having a ceremonial, symbolic meal like Jesus told us to do. And in the gospel we learn that when Jesus appears to the disciples, all of a sudden they recognize him when he breaks the bread. So why don't you break the bread? There you go. Perfect. Now you see how there's all these different parts of the bread? Do you see how it's like little pieces of it? So why don't you hand it around to people? Break off just a little piece for yourself and then hand it off to everybody. And everyone break off a little piece of the bread. And as we do this, we remember that as the church, as the community of God, we are remembering Jesus as one whole body, but yet we're many different pieces. And we go off in different places, and we do different things, and you can continue passing it along and breaking off pieces. Keep going. Everybody have a piece? All right, some of you older ones help the little ones. Excellent, thank you. So now we all have the gathered community of the church, the big gathering, and now we're all individuals as well. And as we eat the individual pieces, it reminds us that we're coming together as the community and we make up God. Now you can go ahead and eat your piece of bread. It hasn't been blessed yet, and to be blessed, we all have to pray over it together. And Christopher will lead those prayers, but we all pray together over the bread and wine. And it's our prayers as a community that make it the real presence of Jesus in our lives and in our church. So, that is a little bit about how we have Eucharist and how we have community and how we have the bread of the Eucharist. So, now we have a challenge. We have to get it all put back together again, or else the altar guild is going to have a problem. So let's start trying to reassemble this whole thing. So, go eat your bread, and we're going to put it back together. How are we going to do this?
It's barfed up.
Well, that regurgitation is always an interesting option. But fortunately, regurgitation isn't going to be necessary today because I did happen to remember to bring another whole piece with me. So let's reassemble this. We start with the chalice. Dan, could you bring me the chalice? All right. You bring that over and put it right there. That's what's going to start us off. This is how the altar guild starts working on it. All right? Now what comes next? The purificator. Who's got the purificator? Alexander has the purificator. Alexander, thank you very much. So we're going to take and put the purificator on top of the chalice, just like that. Excellent. Now we need the paten. Wow, we have the paten. Can you bring up the paten and bring that over here? And we just leave the bread right off it, please, if you would. Just take that. There we go. Excellent. You put the paten right on top of there. Perfect. And now I have an extra to remind us that the pieces come together and they're whole again. And we'll have the bread just like that. Excellent. Thank you very much, Matilda. And then we'll have the pall. Can we put the pall on? Oh, there, yeah. Oh, it doesn't look any worse for wear. That's good. Okay. Then after the pall, let me see. I don't remember my seminary training. What comes after the pall? The veil. Can you bring over the veil? All right. Let's try to do this without making too much of a mess of it here. All right. We'll go with that. Gloria, head of the altar guild, will forgive me for not doing it quite perfectly here. All right. It's a team effort. We're doing our best. Okay. Now we have the burse. Okay. Now, who would like to take all of this back up to the altar? Why don't you grab it there? One hand goes on the chalice. One hand goes on the top so they kind of steady it because it gets kind of slippery. And I'll take it back over here. And why don't you take it around the back so it'll be ready for Christopher here. And just set it right in the middle of the altar. Absolutely perfect. Great. Good. Thank you all for helping us remember Jesus and recognizing Jesus. And in a little while, as a community, we'll do it with the breaking of the bread. So, all of God's people say, Amen.